Speaking of movies that I got immersed in, I recently watched a movie that's been on my list for like years now. It's called It Follows.
Jay, you awake?
What did you do?
You're not gonna believe me, and I need you to remember what I'm saying. This thing, it's gonna follow you. Somebody gave it to me, and I passed it to you. Whoever you want.
Have you seen that, Don?
Yeah, I am a big fan of It Follows. It's been I've been championing it since 2014, ever since the trailer came out, and it didn't have a big release, and I hunted it down in local cinemas because I knew this thing was special, more or less.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I went on a trip recently, and we were just during some downtime, we just like popped on some Netflix, and it was on Netflix. I was like, okay, cool. I'll give it a watch with a bunch of scary movies are the best to watch with people because it's always great to see other people's reactions and stuff. But with It Follows, like I remember seeing the trailer for this film and the premise. And I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting premise. Like this, and just to give a bit of a background for this movie, essentially, the premise is the main character Jay. She goes on a date with this new boyfriend that she's been seeing for a little while, called Hugh. And at one point, they end up having sex at the back of their car, and very much in the way, and the film is set in like this kind of, I don't know what to really call it. It's very strange. It's like 80s, 70s, but it's like,
once again, it's got that 80s feel, and like like not only just the music and in the aesthetic, which is like for us personally, but like in and of itself of like how these teenagers are, I guess, like dressing. It's very set in this very 80s, but like at the same time it is modern. It's once again, it's the same thing of like Drive, for example, where it feels like this is like of a different era, but like it doesn't give you like, it's not blatantly like this is set in this time,
Yeah, it's kind of like what is it, like the B universe in Fringe, right? It's like they kind of like still have like these old school like TVs and cars and stuff, but then they're also using these high tech kind of phone slash like torch watches things that's in it. So like I think it's best to just kind of describe this being in the 70s. But anyway, so like Jay, she has sex with her boyfriend, and then all of a sudden she gets incapacitated by Hugh, who puts like this chloroform over her face, and she wakes up like on a wheelchair, and he kind of tells her, look, I had sex with you because basically there's this entity that's following me, and it'll kill me if it touches me. I pass it on to you because now it'll be chasing after you instead of me. The best thing you can do now is to go off and try and find someone else and have sex with them and make the entity follow them instead. And she's obviously confused, but then she he shows her, and there's just this like kind of creepy like naked woman just like walking really slowly towards them, and it's just like this thing that he just kind of explains, like this thing, it could be
anyone and anything at any time, like where it's like it and it will just keep on coming at you. And once again, once again, I kind of had the idea for a horror movie like maybe 10 years ago, where I'm like, what if there's something where it's invulnerable and you can't do anything about it, but like it moves insanely slow. That like I had kind of that premise, so it was really cool to actually see that in a film. And yeah, it does this really cool thing because it could be like, and once again, the person who I guess is infected or like cursed or whatever it is can only see it. So it does these really cool things where it's like people think that the person who's doing it is crazy, or like, and it does these really cool ways of explaining what's going on, because obviously like there's a horror thing and everyone's usually involved, but in this one it really does isolate the person who's cursed, because they're just like, I have no one to talk to about it, and they only want me in particular, and no one else can see it, and that's like something different that you see kind of in horror films, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the kind of creepy thing about it. It's like you very much can feel very much in like the shoes of Jay as she's kind of running away from this thing, and sees it at her school following her, and she kind of like starts picking out like a little bit of like the rules of how this thing interacts. Like if she calls out to someone and they respond, it's obviously not the creature, because the creature is doesn't respond or say anything, but it moves really slowly. But later on, like she's staying at the house and she hears like a window break and she sees this thing coming in, and her friends are like, "What are you talking about? There's nothing here. There's no naked woman downstairs or whatever." And they open the door and all of a sudden this like tall ass, like lanky ass creepy thing is like looming over him, and then she starts freaking out and running away. And just I think she takes someone's car. No, she runs off into the forest at this stage.
Always a bad idea.
Yeah, always a bad idea. But like all their friends kind of start believing, are like, okay, like maybe there is something going on. Okay, cool, let's try and do something about it. And they take and there's this one moment when they're at the beach where like nobody's paying attention and they're all just kind of chilling out, and then Jay's hair gets pulled up, and then everybody can see it. They can see it for one. I think this was like the one moment I don't know how I felt about it. It was like this thing where it's like everybody can now see it, in a sense. Like they don't physically see it, but they see like, okay, there's this creepy stuff happening to her now. And one of the characters, it's like her like long time like kind of the boy that she kissed when she was younger, like he gets like smacked away by this thing, and they're like, oh no, what's happening? Like everybody's still kind of confused because they still don't see it, and only she can see the entity that's following her, and she kind of like panics and drives off. But later on, like I think one of the other, Greg, he's like a neighbor. He kind of is like, you know what? I'll take the hit. I'll sleep with you. And
I'll sleep with you. This is worth it, guys.
Yeah, which I just kind of found funny. It's just like, yes, I will take the hit and I'll sleep with you and get the entity off your back. And it kind of works as it gets explained. Like, she sees like, it's kind of explained like a couple of days, nothing has happened to Greg. But then all of a sudden she sees Greg outside of his own house. And it's just like this really interesting thing where it's like she's finally seeing it from like a third person, right? And seeing what it's doing. And it just kind of like throws a rock at a window and like walks in. And then eventually she kind of chases after, tries to warn Greg, but by the time she gets there, she's kind of too late, and Greg is dead. And now she has to, because essentially the it entity, it'll once it's killed the latest host or the last person who had sex with someone who, I don't know who, who's
the person
right?
the person that had sex with it basically just revolves round back. So it kind of goes in this whole kind of like pattern where it's like it keeps them going down throughout the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now she's back on the hit list, and she's running away. There's a scene where she I think she drives all the way down to like the beach again, and she sees like a couple of dudes, and I think it's kind of implied that she sleeps with all those guys to kind of give her some time, while she kind of thinks about like how to I don't know if you know what scene I'm referring to, but I'm pretty sure there's she sleeps with, it's all off camera kind of thing. But then eventually her friends kind of come back and they're like, you know what, we gotta come up with a plan. Again, spoilers, guys, for this particular movie, but yeah, her friends are like, okay, no, we gotta come up with a plan. We gotta kill it for real. We gotta, I think we have a plan, and this is what we're gonna do. There's like this pool, that they go to. It's really dumb because it really kind of comes off as like, this is what I was saying, about like kind of 80s stick to this. It's like they kind of come up with this like Scooby-Doo-esque plan where they were gonna electrocute it in the water, and they have all these toasters and all these like electrical appliances everywhere, waiting for the entity to kind of walk into the water. Actually, this is the one thing that I don't know if you knew this when it happened, but like the Jay's sister asks her, oh, what is it here? What does it look like? And Jay says, oh, I don't want to tell you. Now, I didn't know this until later, but the identity that it changes into is actually Jay's father, because they later show like a image, like a picture, and it's like it shows the dad, but the dad is never around in the film, so I think it's kind of implied that the dad is like got killed early in the film.
He's a distant father, basically.
Well, I think
distant to dead father.
Distant to dead. Well, the thing is, like, I think like because I'm an alcoholic, and so I think it's kind of implied that okay, like, you know, obviously, you know, the mum has kind of fallen apart, and you know that's the reason why she's an alcoholic, and that's why Jay didn't want to mention like who it had transformed itself into this time, not to scare the sister, but like eventually, like, you know, they, you know, the it entity comes in and starts chucking toasters and stuff at her in the pool, which I kind of found really funny. But then they actually had a gun and they shot the creature in the head, and then it didn't kill it, and you know they shoot it again, and then it's like it's dead. But then like towards the end of the film, it's kind of implied that it isn't.
Yeah, it kind of leaves it on a note where it's like you can never be too careful, and like it does this, like it does really cool like stuff. This film where in a sense where it has these, like, if you look at carefully of like how the camera is set up, or like it's framed, it's got this very voyeuristic look to it, where you can see two people talking, but like it's more at a distance, and it's like someone's watching them. It does this really cool scene, like especially at the end, where it's like someone's watching, or like something's happening. Like I think the final shot is like them two holding hands, but like it's not seen from like their faces, in a sense where it's like it feels like there's someone else watching them, and it could be the monster.
Yeah, it could be the monster or whatever. I kind of wish that I think there were talks about them doing like a sequel or like a prequel to like explain the film, but I think the film is kind of fine. It's like I want more, like in the sense that like I want
more cool premises, you know?
Well, I don't even mind if it's the same premise. It's just like it'd be cool if there was more like not explanation, but like, you know, in very much the same way as like, you know, any other kind of cool like horror film that has like or any film that has a premise. You want more of that gimmick, and you know, okay, like you know, the characters are like dealing with it in a more modern setting, or like, you know, they're driving away, or maybe there's two of these monsters. Like, you know, there's all these kind of really cool things that they can do with the film, and it'd be interesting to see what they do with it. But overall, like I was pretty satisfied with this film, especially since it was made at a low budget of $2 million, which is always really cool when a film does like, you know, really like, you know, sells really well, and you know, with such a small budget. And you know, it's only a short film, 100 minutes. So yeah, I highly recommend this film. Even if you're not like a big horror person, I think like the film is very well executed, and I think you know, and also there's no like any big actors in it, so it's very much indie darling in that sense. But
these are basically, yeah, it's got a good feel to it. And yeah, I think it's like one of the better horror movies that came out in the past like 10 years or so, because yeah, it's solid, and it's got a different premise, you know.
Yeah, and just to give some context, I don't really go out of my way to watch the film. And I clearly didn't for this film, but like I had a really big interest of watching it followed, just because of how cool the premise sounded. So I highly recommend watching It Follows. Put it on your list.